And, Nikola Tesla had these things 100 years ago.
The individualization of power. In other words, can I take a little box and just run my house out?
So we got all this stuff, we can do this, and we've shown this, but nobody's helping us, and we can't get the government to pop over,
That's why they're taking to the streets. This is where the revolution's going to happen.
What do you think would happen if we put $1 billion into free energy?
This is GlobalBEM Transmissions, the broadcast of the global breakthrough energy movement, presenting voices and ideas from around the planet to activate awareness, promote understanding, and advance the deployment of breakthrough energy technologies. Technologies that not only solve our planet's critical problems, but work to create a unified experience of abundance, creativity, and peace. And now we welcome you to this edition of Transmissions. Welcome to the inaugural edition of GlobalBEM Transmissions. I'm Randy Maugens, and I will be the host for this edition. GlobalBEM Transmissions is an outreach of the global breakthrough energy movement. You can find us on the internet at globalbemvoices.com. And very pleased to be able to launch this series. This is very much an outreach to the public to get people involved, to get people energized in working towards solutions for our planet. The idea of what is called free energy, 0-point energy, all the various terms, is not in the sole domain of scientists, physicists, and engineers, but it is in fact part of every person's commitment to seek out and find answers to the energy problems that beset us on this planet, and that is the point of this show. I couldn't think of a possibly better guest than our guest tonight. She has spent over 30 years of her life researching, learning, writing about, and being an advocate for free energy. And with that, I want to welcome our first guest to GlobalBEM Transmissions, Jeane Manning. Jeane, welcome.
Thank you, Randy. I'm really excited to be here.
I think we're both kind of very similar in that neither one of us, Jeane, are technical people. And I think it's important that the public, the people who are going to hear these shows, not be intimidated by what a lot of times seems like a very technical conversation. You come at this as, I guess, a fairly non-technical person, although hearing you talk, I get the sense that over the years you've picked up a fair amount of familiarity with a lot of what's going on the technical side of it. How did you come to be a researcher, an author, and an advocate of alternative?
My journey started when I was a kid because I was just so close to nature, living on a farm and hanging out in the woods and sitting alongside the creeks and watching how water moves in nature and just really falling in love with the natural world. And so when in 1986 someone told me that we could have an energy technology that's in harmony with nature instead of abusive of nature, that really turned me on. In fact, I was at a Tesla conference, the first Tesla conference that I went to was in 1986. And to me, it was kind of, an extension of hanging out with an inventor and figuring I'd like to write a book about this really fascinating scene, but I wasn't really committed to it. It was just interesting and a summer trip to a conference. But then at the end of the conference, I met a man named William Baumgartner and his wife, and they gave me some books about and by Victor Schauberger, the Austrian forester who studied nature and figured out how to make inventions based on nature's creative motions, not the destructive motions that we have our today's energy technologies based on, explosion and violently splitting an atom and burning fuels and creating messes and wastes and noise. But there's an opposite ways that nature works, and those are the invisible side of it. you can see the dirty side. That's quite obvious, and so people think that that's all there is. That there always has to be a cost and a mess. But nature invisibly is creating at the same time. I know you interviewed a musician who looked into Walter Russell, so you are familiar with this universal in breathing and out breathing of the universe and all the motions in nature.
Yeah, and this goes into, I guess, even the consciousness aspect of this, because I don't think anybody, Jeane, who has ventured into alternative energy comes away with anything but a change in perspective and even a change in consciousness. What you just talked about there, the natural flow of energy within nature. Our technology is destructive, it is dirty, and it is outside of the nature of the creative forces of both the universe and our own planet as well. And when you mentioned Victor Schauberger, I get very excited because for me that was a discovery. I knew about Nikola Tesla. Even as a child, I had heard about Tesla's work. But Victor Schauberger brought some very interesting perspectives to the conversation. And years later, when I began to delve into what I guess is now alternative energy, I realized that we had gone outside of ourselves to look for solutions. Do you get the sense that there is a movement that's kind of coming together? And by that I mean there's a shift in consciousness, there's a shift in perspective. Most people on the planet now know we have problems. They see the imbalance, they see the power systems that have basically controlled the planet for a very long time beginning to fail. Is that part of the perspective that you came away from in your own journey?
Oh, I've really seen it develop in recent years. It's really exciting. It's what I had hoped for, and thought that I was just a visionary that was a dreamer, as my parents used to say. Because you're thinking about things that other people weren't thinking about. But I think this global breakthrough energy movement is one of the manifestations of it. That we've got this, and a younger age group than had been involved in this now aging energy field, and just reclaiming our right to control our sources of energy choices, and of course, you say the results of the wrong technologies are so visible to so many people now. A lot of people in the province of Canada, where I live, British Columbia, are really getting fed up with the building of pipelines and the plan to dam up a beautiful river which would flood farmland in order to provide power to run the tar sands. I mean, we're just outraged, and the tanker traffic along the beautiful coastlines. I mean, that's part of my motivation. I was born in a small village in Alaska. My dad was a lawman up there, Cordova. And then in 1989, the Exxon Valdez oil tanker spilled its guts all over the Prince William Sound, and it still hasn't totally recovered. I mean, the oil company PR says that it's cleaned up, but it's not. You dig down into the sand. I haven't been back there, but I've talked to a scientist who has spent the last 20 years herself working on 30 years, dig down into the sand, and there's still the black, oily mess bubbling up, and the herring fishery still hasn't totally recovered. So, the people of British Columbia don't want this to happen here, and people all over the world are looking at monstrous technologies like fracking for natural gas, which is so unnatural.
I live in a state where fracking is very common. I live in Pennsylvania, and fracking is just rampant here right now, and it's dividing people along lines politically and socially.
Well, if you turn on your water tap and you can light a match and explode.
Yes, absolutely.
Or just knowing that your children might be drinking some water that's contaminated with the chemicals that they use. So all these invasive and dirty sources of getting our power they're wrecking our waterways and our clean water supplies, and that's the most precious element on this planet is our beautiful blue waters. And so, yeah, a lot of people are waking up. And this is a general, just because in times of change, people question the path that they've been on. Like in this case, so many people just been on the materialistic path, and as they lose their jobs or times of uncertainty in other ways, they start to question their values. And so you do see, even though there's a lot of war and crime, but there's also a lot of people waking up spiritually and saying, what's it all about? And if they start asking what's it all about, this leads to more likelihood that they're going to grow spiritually into a more responsible being who takes responsibility for all life and the planet we live on and the web of life on our planet. So,
I'm so glad you brought up the spirituality side of that. That is an important component as well. We have lived in the modern industrial age through a time of rampant materialism and science, which is basically based on materialism itself. And it seems to me, Jeane, like the new science, which is sprung out of quantum mechanics, is much more tilted towards a spiritual approach. We're starting to sense now that we're not hardwired into the scientific methodologies of the past, but we're somewhat liberated because as spiritual beings we know that there's a creative aspect to us. Is that something that you're seeing reflected in your travels and your conversations with people?
Oh, yes, and among the scientists that we interview, too, when they really start asking serious questions about, looks like we haven't been taught everything that there is to know, so what else is going on that we haven't been taught about or that we have overlooked by just having this 20th century science worldview, which is materialistic and reductionistic. The change, what I see is one of the signs of the change. There's a scientist, a biochemist at Case Western Reserve University, Eric Androulis, and he's a professor there. And last year I was talking with him because he'd put out a paper, published it about the mystery of life, and it was as anything that's really outside the box is. It was ridiculed, but I read the paper, and there were some who did see that this is solid thinking and many years of pondering, and so this kind of gets back to my affinity for Victor Schauberger's outlook about the vortical movements in nature, and Eric Androulis talks about the gyres, Gyres, that are seen everywhere in nature, and so anyway, the bottom line is that he comes to the conclusion that the Earth is alive, and everything that's mostly considered inanimate, but planets and water and proteins and DNA, and that they're animate, and has a whole scientific model of what is going on. So it's pretty wild, but if you read it, it's rational, and it's verging into the spiritual. It's just wonderful.
Pardon us here. We have a southbound train that comes through here, and we're not terribly soundproof, so...
well, that's supposed to be a...
Yeah, that's the Burlington Northern, actually hauling coal south from the northern mining region here.
Okay.
It's old school technology, old school
that might be
platforms.
changed to electric trains, and instead of hauling coal, you can haul a lot of other loads, but those power plants that are powered by coal can be replaced by some of these technologies, like Randall Mills hydrogen-based and other hydrogen-based technology that they can just slip their unit into other types of large power plants and just replace whether it's take out the rods from the nuclear reactor and replace it with a clean generator, or replace the boilers technology in coal-fired power plants and with cavitation-based technologies, or just all sorts of possibilities that can replace the noisy, dirty ones.
Well, I also live here, and I can actually, from the top of the hill where I live here, see it. I live near 3 Mile Island. So, these are technologies that are very scary. If you look at what's happened, for instance, with Fukushima, and I don't believe we've been told all the damage that's been done with Fukushima. What we see is a heavy price that's been paid for our modern society to be powered by the old platforms of technology.
That one weighs heavy on my heart because it's potentially threatening a whole ocean and all the life around it.
I wanted to
go back. You think I'm exaggerating?
No, I don't. I've watched this, and like I said, I don't believe we're well informed about the damage that has been done. I know here, when 3 Mile Island reacted, when it blew up, whatever happened to it, I was living here at the time, and within 10 years, the cancer rates here began to skyrocket. It was covered up, it was paid off, but it also bankrupted the company that owned the nuclear power plant, but they quickly turned around and formed a new corporation and sold it to themselves and insulated themselves from their liabilities and moved forward. We, as I say, pay a horrible price for this, and looking into the future through the eyes of the next generations that are coming up, we either leave them a legacy of a bold new initiative in energy, or we leave them with a dying planet and very little hope of anything that would resemble the lifestyles that we have today.
Yeah, well, that's just not acceptable to some of us, is it? So we're going to do all we can to make sure that enough people hear about the alternatives in time to support them, because it's support that's needed. The inventions are invented. One scientist said to me, "I got all the answers you need right here in my shirt pocket. How many technologies do you want?" It's the lack of political will, because people don't hear about the real revolutionary possibilities, because they're hidden behind the ridicule barrier. People are afraid to support them if they're in certain jobs, like certain academic positions, where they would be either ridiculed by their peers, because that's been the knee-jerk reaction that's been conditioned into us, or perhaps their grant funding might be threatened if they happen to be in a field like hot fusion. Something coming out of nowhere looks threatening. So instead of rethinking things and saying, okay, things are going to have to change, so how can we make a transition? How can we make this go smoothly? In the world, we should have our top thinkers in economics and regional planning, everything related to job creation. All of the best thinkers on this planet should be putting their heads to the question of how can we, as painlessly as possible, transition to a new energy economy of abundance and clean energy for all, with no energy apartheid, no one left out, no have-nots, and no fighting over what's underneath somebody else's fans in the desert, and just totally change everything. There's just so much fear of change. That's where we have to take our power back and occupy the energy
There you
sector.
go. I like that. You come to an interesting point there, and it has to do with the disruptive aspects of alternative energy. The argument, and I remember hearing Ralph Ring talk about the work that they were doing on their anti-gravity vehicle back in the 1960s, and the fact that they went to General Motors, and General Motors said, well, you can't do this because it would destroy the economy. I think one of the things that I look at now when I think about that anecdote is they've already pretty much destroyed the economy, so the disruption level now looks to be a short blip compared to what it might have been 30 or 40 years ago. What is your perspective on the disruptive aspects of new energy technology as we move forward, Jeane?
Well, it is a reality that there will be big changes in the way people do things and what the jobs are. So there will have to be retraining. So it'll have to be planned, or it will be chaotic, but it's going to happen. And definitely the fear of losing one's job is held over so many people that's why they're afraid to look in this direction. I know in British Columbia again, the big drumbeat of the reigning political party is, well, we have to have this fracking because we need the jobs. We have to cooperate with the oil sands and the dams because we have to have the jobs, and they create jobs. But it is possible to create jobs installing and maintaining the new technologies. I'm going to create a lot of jobs, just like the solar industry can create a lot of jobs within installation and just all aspects of getting a product out to people and changeovers. And it wouldn't happen overnight. You know, people fear just sudden, I wake up the next morning and everything that I know is collapsed. Well, it doesn't happen that way because the inertia of what we have keeps most systems in place. I mean, we'll still have the cars that were built to take gasoline. So the changeover, the reformatting and retooling of factories and everything, it'll all take time, and it can be a project that society, with more cooperation between sectors and between countries, and just more of a feeling of we're the human family, and we're going to figure out a way to do this as smoothly as we can. There can be a lot of hand-holding in ways that we haven't seen before, new alliances and new projects and excitement. A woman who has worked in the technical field for many years, and she said, I'm a geek, always hung out with geeks, and these guys, they love science fiction, and just in their hearts they would love to see this revolutionary new technologies that are going to allow things to be possible that weren't possible before, whether it's travel to the stars is a pretty far out goal, but more immediately just new materials that are possible from some of the new technologies, like the black power technology, where they're creating new combinations that haven't ever been combined before of elements. The possibilities are not just batteries that are a lot more efficient, but using translucent materials in architecture, insulating in beautiful ways. I think I'm an architect at heart, but I can just see these soaring structures that are possible. And with abundance of clean energy, you don't have to be tied to that's an energy-intensive process limitations. Recycling of anything, any type of metal that's now too energy-intensive to be economic, will become possible and economic. So just all sorts of possibilities. Any engineers or other specialists with a great imagination can just go for it and create wonderful, beautiful cities and put energies to human energy to work restoring ecosystems, rejuvenating water systems, cleaned up waterways can be cleaned and electricity generated at the same time. Just really exciting possibilities. I think we have to let people to know that their focus on the dark and the fearful future, the Mad Max Black scenarios.
Yes, the
dystopian
future.
Helps to create them, where we could be creating something entirely different. And
this is an important point. We have been, when I was a kid growing up, I remember, for instance, watching The Jetsons, which was a cartoon. And we've joked over the years, my friends and I, the people that I grew up with, about the fact that we never really got the jetpacks we were supposed to. We still don't have an automated maid in a beautiful tower, and we don't jump into an anti-grav vehicle to go to work each day like George Jetson. So in a sense, the visions that we were sold as a kid, because I'm a geek, I'm a sci-fi fan, I'm a technical person, that which I guess you would call contrarily the utopian vision, in a lot of ways it got watered down. And we've been sold this Mad Max apocalyptic, dark, dim vision of a future where there'll be energy blackouts and we won't be able to properly house and clothe and feed ourselves. How do we feed a positive vision back into the culture, Jeane?
Well, I think your radio show is a good start, and everything that the Global Breakthrough Energy Movement and New Energy Movement can do to put out materials and talks and slide presentations and everything with visuals of what can be. A lot of visuals are needed. Maybe we can get a lot of volunteers who have skills in creating beautiful graphic images, and in encouraging people to speak to everybody, spread the word, speak to everyone they know, and somehow getting into the entertainment industry. I think you've looked into that in your life, haven't you? How to put out a more positive future.
Yes, that's something that I think as media people we need to concentrate our efforts on. One of the encouraging things to me about GlobalBEM movement is that there are artists and musicians and filmmakers who are getting involved in this. And like you noted before, Jeane, there is a younger group of people being drawn into this energy movement. Young people. I have a son who's 28 years old, and we talk a lot about this. He's very interested in alternative energy. He's very plugged into the culture of the internet. He spends more time looking probably at YouTube videos than he ever does looking at network television. And he represents to me something in the next generation coming up, the generation that's coming of age, is there is an optimism inside of him. I think that's part of the human spirit as well. It's our jobs, both collectively and individually, to funnel that hope back out there, to light that fire for that positive vision, because you've identified it. We can either feed off of the dystopian dark visions, or we can begin to funnel back into the culture a sense of hope and an appreciation for the fact that change does not necessarily mean the end of our culture, but actually a jumping off point for something higher and better.
Beautiful. Yeah, and the Global BEM conference coming up in Boulder in October, I'm so pleased that, again, they're going to have a music component because that really sets the tone. And have you ever heard the New Energy Movement song by Sean Galloway?
I have, yes.
I love that. I can't just sit there. I have to start dancing. And also, maybe we could do an art show if enough artists are inspired to present a vision of a future that's possible. Because I really think that the arts, and drama too, street theater, these are the ways that you kind of bypass people's resistances. You get through the filters by just going straight to the heart with the creative arts. I used to work as a publicist for a theater company that traveled around from town to town in gypsy wagons pulled by Clydesdale horses.
Oh, wow.
And they were very political, and they got their resistance message out by song and dance, and the characters in plays and the beautiful masks that they made, and just it was such a talented, imaginative group. So that's one of the ways to get the word out. And I thought of writing fiction because that's something that people are willing to kind of put aside their prejudice and just get into a story.
Yes,
and there's so many stories.
Yes,
yeah.
Very much so.
And there's certainly a lot of drama that I've encountered in this whole new energy scene. The intrigue, anytime people are trying to be heroic, which means taking on something that the dragon doesn't want you to take on, then there's bound to be a lot of human drama, and there is. That's kind of what interested me at first, because I'm a people person, and I thought, it's this inventor that I just met here, and the stories of what the inventors are up against. I never dreamed. I just thought, somebody's inventor, they invented a better invention, and the world beats a path to their doorstep. And he said, the world beats a path to your doorstep and beats you up if you're in this energy field.
Yeah. You tell some very interesting stories in your writings, and we should note here that you're the author or co-author of what about, as nearly as I can tell, about a half dozen books in various subjects related to energy.
Mostly energy related, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, my first solo book was The Coming Energy Revolution, and so in 1996, Avery of New York published that, and I thought that was kind of the end of the journey. Well, I'm done. I've done my job. I can move on to something different. And my background's, degree in sociology. What am I doing in this field so long anyway? But actually, it turned out to be only the beginning, because once you are seen as somebody that understands what these people are trying to do and gets it, then a lot more people approached me that wouldn't have before with confiding what they were doing. And in some cases that I have, or any time that I say I won't write about it unless you give me permission, I don't. So some things I'll just carry to my grave with me, but I wanted to know. I wanted to know what was going on, even if I couldn't write about it, because it just kind of gives a context for my thinking and understanding what our hopes of actually having an energy revolution actually are. I just want to have the big picture. I did, like you say, I did get into some of the details of what they're doing. I find it fascinating. My mind just happens to enjoy learning about new science, and I never pretend to ever be able to teach about it on my own. I very meticulously quote exactly what they say to me. I transcribe a lot of audio tapes and have learned so much in the process. So I'm kind of the poster child or poster granny for the fact that, like you said in the beginning, we're not technical people, but we can take part in this field. And so I'm kind of the example that even a woman who's been a social worker and mother and really what am I doing hanging out with these physicists and engineers, because I don't have a hard hat on or a degree in engineering, but it's okay. I noticed that in the beginning there were men that had no technical credentials either that would hang out at the energy conferences, and I've gone to conferences all over the world. And so for years I just kind of felt like I wish there were more women here. I just do feel like I stand out, and sometimes I overhear some
about that. It's
very
male-dominated, yes.
Yeah, but I'm happy to say that now with I'm seeing female presence in the global breakthrough energy movement, and we've got on the board of the energy movement in Portland. I think Stephanie's on the board now, our publicist, and so that's changing. but it's just a matter of reclaiming our right to be there and to have a voice in what's chosen for our children and grandchildren's future and our own near future too. What we're going to breathe, the air we breathe, how clean it is, the water in our rivers, how clean it is. Protect our oceans.
Yeah, that's why I think I've probably said it at least once so far. This is a multidisciplinary effort. All talents are needed to do this, including the talent of simply being a person interested enough to look into the history and the future of alternative energy. And again, these books that you wrote detailing the development of alternative energy as well as the struggles of some of the scientists is important, because we forget that a man like Nikola Tesla, was actually actively suppressed, and at times he actually left science altogether. At one point, I believe he was actually doing road work or pavement work in New York City.
Mm-hmm. That's happening today too. The Teslas of today. It's kind of heartbreaking sometimes to see the wasted talent when they can't get funding to do anymore. They have families to support, so they have to go back to the grind. My inventor friend up here in Canada, Alphon Kerr, has to keep going back to working on the provincial highways because he had put all his money into magnets and other equipment for his work on this invention, but his family has to be fed. Well, I hope this is changing.
It's interesting, and this is another component to this as well, the funding aspect. It is actually to our detriment that funding and financing of energy projects has been centralized into the hands of the few, that being, of course, the bankers, the government, and the large universities, all of whom are feeding off of the public largesse. And I've had conversations with economists, including Dr. David Martin, who was over at Hilversum last fall, talking about ways to creatively begin looking at how we fund and finance the work we need to do. Because I know that there's a lot of people out there who are brilliant, who have a lot of ideas, who have plans on the table, even working designs, and they have no money to go forward. What is your insight on that? Do you have a sense that there is a way to creatively, alternatively finance alternative energy, Jeane?
Oh, it's happening, not in the larger scale as we need, but it is happening. For example, Eric Dollard, the electrical genius living in California, and he was living out in the desert in his car, and someone discovered the fact that this man, who actually had built replica of Tesla's magnifying transmitter and technology and understood what Tesla was doing, what radiant energy is, but he's also an electrical engineer, qualified and brilliance. And there he was living in his car in the desert. So crowdfunding, this person who decided to organize some crowdfunding, and they succeeded. So they're getting a lab together for Eric now, and he's revitalized, and he's going to be one of the speakers at a technical conference at the end of June in North Idaho. And it's kind of like I felt when I was at a conference in Europe many years ago, and Professor John Searle kind of came out of, it was almost like he died because people knew the story of this man who had a magnetic generator that went levitation, went into anti-gravity mode. It was like a legend, and that nobody would ever see him again because that happened. It was back in the 1940s when he made his invention. But anyway, when he showed up at this conference in Switzerland, we just had this wonderful, joyful feeling of one of our own coming back into the fold, and he was very emotional about it. Now, Eric Dollar's probably not an emotional type of guy, but I have the same feeling about. Justice does happen sometimes where somebody's work is rediscovered and they are brought out. And also I think that the behind-the-scenes philanthropy is starting to happen, which I always had looked as kind of the only hope, since it's obvious that the governments see that their vested interests are in continuing to collect fuel taxes, and they have no intention of funding anything really revolutionary that's going to change everything. And that really our only hope was independent philanthropy, because the usual business model, I've seen that result in people inventors being ripped off, and sometimes their inventions are just taken and buried after someone comes along with great promises about funding them and getting them to sign on with some contract, and the end they're left there standing with some sort of a business mess, and they may be sued, or they may have in the first inventor that I met, what happened to him was he ended up having to pay for leased equipment and leased office equipment that he never would have contracted for if it hadn't been for these promises of some business person that came along with the right story to sweet talk him. So the inventors have been so vulnerable, but this situation can't go on forever, and I really believe it is slowly starting to change.
Let's talk for a few minutes about this current book, Infinite Energy Technologies, which you contributed articles to. And this book came to me by way of the publisher, which is Inner Traditions. And I contacted Finley Eversole, who was the editor of the book, and this is very much an anthology, and you contributed, I believe, 2 writings to this book. You detailed the history here of somebody I did not know about, and that's T. Townsend Brown. Can you talk a little bit about this? Because when I read this, I have to tell you, this is probably one of the most enlightening and yet tragic stories of people who have been swept into the dustbin of history, unjustifiably so.
Yes, and the story continues to evolve, because since I wrote that chapter, I've learned from an interview with a man up in Canada that somebody else did, that Townsend Brown is said to have worked in the Avro plant in Ontario, where they were building a flying disc,
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty outrageous claim. But this man had quite a lot of detailed and documented story to back up the rest of his story. So basically, what Townsend Brown discovered is that the force of gravity could be tweaked or even blanked out by the electrical force. And if you talk to Tom Balone, you would get a very deep lecture on electrogravitics. He's very knowledgeable about that. That there is this whole field that was quite active in up until somewhere in the 1950s. Companies were openly working on electrogravitics, and there were articles published in public spectacle magazines.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I remember some of these articles actually reading.
And then
just
it went quiet. Yeah, it then just went quiet. I think if you ever get a chance to interview Dr. Paul LaViolette.
He's on my list, absolutely. Yes.
Oh, good.
He's a hero,
good.
Yes.
Because he's brought out a lot of that story, and I'm kind of related to that. again, Tom Balone is an expert on something called inertial propulsion, which he's written books about. But I was at a conference last year or so when a Boeing engineer gave a talk at Tom Balone's conference, and it turned out that Boeing had been using this inertial propulsion in something called forced precessed gyroscopes to move satellites in orbit. And this engineer, Mike Gamble, even showed Tom a picture of this technology. So, as you know, the military-industrial complex has access to some futuristic technologies that you don't hear about through the universities or the popular science magazines. And well, popular science magazines might kind of touch on these things, but they don't come out and spell out that, hey, the public could be using or benefiting from some of these technologies. You know, even if you don't want to go fly off out beyond our planet, the whole knowledge that Townsend Brown was working on could be, you know, a way to generate electricity, clean electricity, low cost.
Was he not also working, and I don't have the exact citation in front of me, on energy that was literally coming out of rocks? So this was like cosmic wave energy as well that he was exploring near the end of his career.
Yeah, I call that petrovoltaics, I think. You know, like petro, I guess, for rocks.
Right,
and,
right.
And there's a mad scientist who's a good friend of mine, John Hutchison, who's worked along those lines too, and just picked up the right rocks in the gravel outside his apartment building, and hooked up his little power cells, which they're free energy. They're only putting out, say, milliwatts, but that's a demonstration that you can light something up with free energy. Again, this doesn't make it into the universities, but...
Well, what's interesting to me is the interface between this particular area of science and what many people in what I guess we would call the New Age energy healing movement know in utilizing crystals in healing. And I've actually seen demonstrations of crystal healing. I use crystals myself. And a lot of people understand that there's an amplification of energy that's naturally coming from the minerals themselves, and that there's a conductive energy that comes from us, inside of us, that human beings are themselves an energy capacitator in some way. And it's interesting to see how science kind of, in some ways now, is beginning to connect to what many people consider to be kind of the woo-woo fringe side of things.
Mm-hmm. Everywhere from astrophysics, and there are questions about dark energy. You've got this big mystery out there. I don't know what's going on. Or down to the tiny level of zero-point energy in quantum physics. But I'm glad you mentioned the alternative health field, because I think that this is a bridge to the public that hasn't heard about the non-conventional replacements for coal and oil and nuclear, is that once people have experienced a health crisis that the doctors have kind of washed their hands of and written off, and said, you know, there's really nothing more we can do. But a lot of people have turned to alternative sources just out of, okay, well, I'll give this a try, and it can't hurt to try. And then they find that there really is something to working with the life force that's in each of us. And of course, the ancients called it prana or chi, and the Eastern societies know it's very real in the Far East. And so healers work with it, and it's just a variation of understanding the background energy of the universe, which is what a lot of these inventions tap into. I mean, ultimately, the what gives magnets, these new super powerful permanent magnets, what gives them the power that you can't wear it out just by using it. You know, you can lift way more than its own weight, and indefinitely, and the only thing that is going to wear it out is if it's overheated or dropped and shattered. So what's going on there? You know, we know that it's the answer is down at the level of the magnetic spin of atoms, atomic level. But, you know, let's get to the question of what gives the electron its permanent spinning motion. You know, that's perpetual motion. So it brings up questions that all relate. And like with that physicist I mentioned who's got a kind of a theory of everything, Eric Androulis, I think that maybe my grandchildren will be studying a really beautiful form of physics where the answers are not couched in some obscure terms that nobody can understand because the physicists themselves don't understand it, but rather, oh yeah, okay, so that's how nature works, and that makes sense, because what's real seems to always turn out to be simpler than what's just somebody playing with mathematics and going off and formulating some far-out string theory. So it's really down-to-earth stuff.
It is down-to-earth stuff, and we can begin at the most basic levels. There are people who are gifted in science and mathematics and engineering, and I'm in awe of them because I'm not. That's not my gift. But I think what you're trying to do in your work and what the Global Breakthrough Energy Movement is attempting to do on a broad scale publicly is to reach out to people, to let them know that they are part of the solution, that each one of us contributes in some way through our consciousness, through our energy, through our just curiosity about alternative energy. And by doing that, we begin to push the consciousness bubble, which is what I believe really does matter. I believe that each person pushes out their energy, and in doing so, they move against what has been a roadblock for developing new energy. Is that kind of the sense you feel right now, Jeane, that if each one of us simply, in our own way, focuses on this, we can begin to make a difference, that there is hope for the future?
I sure do, because I've seen in my own life where I helped to create what's going to happen next by my focused thinking about and picturing and envisioning with emotion. And lo and behold, whether it was a mistake or I was picturing something fearful or it was something positive that I intentionally pictured, it works. So like you say, anyone, even wheelchair bound, whatever your situation is and gifts, anyone can make a contribution in some way. And of course, my co-author Joel Garvin and I have this kind of mantra that the consciousness revolution has to come before the energy revolution. And so that starts with each of us. It's not something you sit around and hope that the world creates consciousness. They don't look around and wait for it, but you look. I just have to examine my own life and say, well, am I being love in this situation, or am I being fearful or angry or greed? Because I'm going to help create a world that's what I'm focusing on. And there are companies that are of the new paradigm. I just visited one in the field that has been misnamed cold fusion, and low energy nuclear reaction still may not be the name it ends up with, because it's still evolving as to what the science is behind it. But anyway, Deucalion Green Technologies, and they relocated from Greece to Vancouver, and I visited them. And the difference between them and the corporate culture that's developed in other places in recent decades is clearly quite dramatic. You know, they of course, a lot of companies say that they emphasize teamwork, and okay, that's part of it, but their intention is to honor an experience that their CEO had, and it kind of turned into a motto. What happened was he was living in an apartment building in Greece before he moved, and the landlord came to him and said, you know, the elderly woman living in this apartment, Mrs. Maria, and you know, she was a friend of your mother's, Alex, and she can't pay her heating bill, and so she's figuring she's going to have to turn off her heat, and can you do something? So he said, oh, sure, put it on my account. And then when last fall came and it was time for him to move to Canada, she was talking to her, and she said, gee, I'm really smart, Mr. Alex. I knew I couldn't pay my heat, so I knew that the apartment above me and the apartment below me and each apartment beside me would be hot, so that I'd be okay. And I was warm enough last winter. And he was just moved to tears because he realized that this simple person was really vulnerable, and she hadn't realized that somebody had been paying her heating bill. So they, when they talk about what they want to bring out in the way of a product that's affordable, they say, let's do this for the Mrs. Marias of the world. So, yeah, change is happening. Change.
So here in the closing minute or two, Jeane, what do you have on your horizon for the near future? What are you excited about? And also, let people know how they can find you, find your books, and give out your website.
Okay, well, I'll start with the websites. I'm even though I'm not involved in it financially, I want to promote Finley's book, Infinite Energy Technologies, and doesn't have a website, but it can be found on Amazon and Baker and Taylor. Our book, Breakthrough Power, it has its website, breakthroughpower.net, and I'm going to be emphasizing the ebook more.
Yeah.
And I've got a blog, changingpower.net. So what I plan to do in the next few months is just kind of get my act together. But another relocation coming up. But I definitely want to be at the Breakthrough Energy Movement Conference in the fall. I'll continue to. I can't help it. I can't say I'm going to stop networking because I get the phone calls and emails and the requests, and so I find myself continuing to write articles, and maybe there'll be another book. Maybe I'll tell all in a autobiography, or I just can't stop putting out the message because I keep learning more about the unfolding new science behind all these different variations of new energy technology, A to Z, the anti-gravity to zero-point energy, and everything in between, plasma technologies and cavitation. And I particularly love the magnetic motor approach because these guys really are showing how you can tweak the way that a coil interacts in a magnetic motor generator and create more energy output than input. Again, the background energy of the universe coming in to fill in that. It isn't violating a law of conservation of energy. So I love the new science, and I guess that will be going on for the rest of my life. I
can't think of a better way to end it than that. Jeane Manning, you have provided us with a wonderful hour to give us the launch for the GlobalBEM transmissions outreach, and I want to thank you for taking time from your busy schedule. Again, the website for Jeane Manning is changingpower.net. You can go there, and we will be back again with another guest. These shows will begin to show up on the website. The website is globalbemvoices.com. I'm Randy Maugens for the Global Breakthrough Energy Movement, and we'll be back again very soon.
Thanks, Randy.